Welcome back to Continuing the Conversation, where we bring you authentic AI insights. I'm your host, Chelene Martin, AI enthusiast, business strategist, and the co-founder of Revenue Pulse Advisors. I work with individuals and companies to unlock practical, powerful ways to use AI every day in life and work. And since this is a conversation and not a lecture, let's dive in. Here's the thing. Everyone says just start using AI. We say it on our show all the time. Try ChatGPT, experiment with Claude, explore Gemini, just get started. But nobody tells you the one thing that quietly sabotages your results before you even type or say a word. Today, we're fixing that. We're revealing the secret that changes everything about how you prepare and approach AI. And trust me, once you see it, you'll never unsee it. Joining me today is Rob, the CEO of CharmIQ. Rob, this isn't just another prompting tips episode, is it?
Thank you, Chelene. And no, if one thing we don't do here is continue to show prompting tips, we try to help you think about the way to think about these things. We're trying to give you little tips and tricks to help tune your brain so that when you go in there, you do the right thing.
Exactly. And before we dive into the first question, I want to set the stage for our listeners. Whether you're new here or been with us for a while, we've been trained to think of tech tools as tools, right? You push a button, it does a thing. But AI just isn't another tool. It's a collaborator, a context-aware thinking partner, a co-pilot for when you're exploring new ideas, a creative amplifier for when you're stuck, a digital teammate that remembers everything you've said and brings it back with clarity and improvement. So when we treat it like just another app or a machine or a tool, we really miss the true power. So Rob, you've said most people's AI issues start before they even type a single prompt. What's going on here? And when we treat it like just another app, tool, or machine, we miss its real power. Give us your insights.
What's exciting about the new AI that we have is that it's truly a collaborative partner. We've been trained over the years to type in simple instructions. You go into Excel, you type in a formula. You go into Google, you type keywords. I remember, it's like almost 2 decades ago, I went to a talk from Google and they had been trying to go towards sentences and more conversational things, but they realized that they had taught all of us to just simply bark keywords into the thing. So, a chat tool, free or something, right? And then you get your answers. That transition's happened a little bit now because now we go into ChatGPT and we have a little bit of a conversation with it. But we still think about these things transactionally. We still think about them in terms of a tool. We still think of them as we're presenting the questions and we're waiting for it to give us the answers. And think about all the things you have. Think about all the things you have in your life. When you go to start your car, you just press a button and you expect the car to start. Same thing goes with ChatGPT. You're usually just going in there for kind of Google next step. So type in a request, get a response, create a report, generate this, summarize that.
Yeah, I think that's true. We've been trained. Hey Siri, hey Alexa, it's just barking orders. So now that we know, and hopefully we're getting it through our heads, that artificial intelligence isn't just a tool to bark orders at, it's different from every other tool we used. So what makes it different and how should we be thinking about it as we're starting on the journey, in the journey, or excelling in our journey?
Question. Well, what's interesting is, again, if you think about your Googles, you would type in something and then from then on, you weren't really in the conversation anymore. You would say, again, chat tool free, and you would get a list of them and you're kind of outside of that. Same thing when you go into Excel, you type in your formula. Once you're outside that box, it's not continuing the conversation anymore.
Right.
To kind of dovetail into our own conversations here, we are trying to continue the conversation. And I think that's the same thing that you really need to exploit, and you need to think about how it impacts your conversation. So we find a lot of times when people are using ChatGPT that they'll just use the same massive conversation that they may have had 12 different things inside of that conversation. And so it's this really, really big thing. And we see almost the same thing sometimes in Charm as well. People have just like a really massive document that contains basically everything that they've been thinking about for that day, week, month. And that's That's interesting. Like, it seems like we've almost gone to the opposite extreme. So we went from Google, where we type in our 2 keywords and then that's it, to now it's like everything we could possibly get in there. It almost seems like we've been kind of waiting for this moment where we can say all the things that we want to say. But that has some interesting side effects as well. Because if you have that entire conversation, what you end up doing is some of the mistakes that you had, or some of the incorrect answers that you wanted back, or you realized you didn't provide enough information. And all of that's kind of muddying it up. So again, if we go with the analogies, if you think about your car doesn't really drive differently because you took a trip yesterday. It drives the same way as it did yesterday. Again, you go to Google, and sure, within some minor changes here, as it knows a little bit about it tries to get more about your persona, so it tries to recommend you better things. But again, like it doesn't use the information that you just had. But again, that's not true when you look at your ChatGPT history, or you look at your Charm document, you look at everything in there. All of that information is starting to, well, we can talk about it like a big soup. Everything that you've put in there, if you've ever made soup, and if you've put like a little too much of one ingredient in, it's really hard to get that to then filter back out. Like,
yes, it's
almost better to make the new soup sometimes than it is to try to compensate for that one bitter ingredient that you might have had.
Yeah, so that's true. I think I know I get excited in the conversation, especially as I started out, and my documents were a big soup problem, right? I'm thinking the more I tell it, the more I personalize it, the better it's going to be at giving me the answers that I'm looking for, right? So the soup analogy really resonates with me because I'm guilty of that. And so if asking better questions isn't enough, or providing a boatload of content or conversations that go on and on and on and on, or too much salt in our soup, which I've definitely had, what's the real responsibility? What's our real responsibility when working with AI going forward?
So this is something we talk about a lot. And I like the opportunity here to really talk about this, which is managing your context. So I'll do my usual extremes situation, which is if you don't provide any context, if you just simply bark your orders at your AI, you're getting the exact same answers that everyone else gets. And in the case of Google, like, that's fine, right? Because if you're looking for the top selling such and such, like, you want the same thing that somebody else's want. But ideally, the reason ostensibly you're using a chatbot or something else is you're trying to get deeper insight. You're trying to get more out of this than you would have expected. So the goal there is you have to cultivate that context carefully. One of the challenges we find that people have with like ChatGPT is they'll ask a question, it'll give an answer, they'll ask, follow-ups and so forth. And again, all of that will kind of pollute what's being talked about, especially if you weren't going the right way to begin with. What we teach people in Charm, for example, is once you've had a question or two and you figure out where you're going, you just basically get rid of some of that stuff, or you pull out the pieces that you don't want. Or again, what's super enjoyable about using Charm is you can go through and cross some of them out, or you can add comments to the ones that are there. And then you can have like a little sidebar conversations, if you will, about those things. And, sometimes I do the whole, hey, I mentioned this, but you didn't really do anything with that information, or other things, or like, why aren't you bringing in this information? And you can have that discussion. Again, once it's done, you can actually remove that and then keep going. I love that technique myself personally, because it will show me that I'm either getting better at the context that I'm providing, or that I'm giving it the information that it needs. Because I will take the same question that I just had and I'll remove the answer that I just got and I'll ask it again and I'll get another response. And then I'll change the context a little bit and I'll ask the same question again and I'll get a new response. And you don't get that ability in ChatGPT. You don't really get the like, let me not think about this section that we just talked about. Let me move that aside and let me go back. That's almost one of the main reasons we built Charm, was to get that flexibility in there. So distilling all this down, it's all about managing the context. You're trying to, in much the same way that you don't get this ability with people, like how many relationships have you been in where whether that's personal or work, where you've put your foot in your mouth and you just wish like, man, I wish I could like dial that back and not say that thing or learn that thing off on the side. So there's been many situations where we've had in our workplace and whatnot, where again, we wish we could have taken back something that we said and whatnot. And that's what's so amazing about these chatbots, is that you do have that ability to do that. You can give it more context, ask the same question again, and so forth. And you can work in that little tight cycle bringing in new context and seeing if it changes the answers that you get. And Chelene, you had mentioned earlier that, you almost share too much information. And I would say that was a problem of the older models, where if you shared too much, that they would get confused and you would see things get off track. But I have seen, especially with these later models, the Claude 4s, the Gemini 2.5s, my goodness, is it good at like distilling down. So, 6, 8, 12 months ago, I would have definitely said, don't overshare with your chatbot du jour. I would say absolutely now, don't worry too much about it, because they are really good at finding the bit and distilling it down. And just like the fact that you can take a massive document and say like, hey, on this previous note that I said, like, let's talk about that. And the fact that it knows exactly what you said, where it was. So there's some benefit in those cases. And what we do recommend for people to do, again, especially in a platform like Charm, where you can manage your context really well, is keep your documents at all of the apertures that you have them. So keep the raw transcript, keep some of the sidebars that you have, just simply put them in second separate documents and bring them in as you need them, and get rid of them as you don't need them. Again, one of the interesting powers in Charm is the fact that you can just turn on and off your reference material as you see fit. And you will night and day see how these things shift and change and so forth. In the same way that your system prompt, your Charm, it completely changes the types of ways that it thinks and talks to you. So at the end of the day, that's what we distill it down to, is really work on your context and really spend the time there.
Yeah. So clean ingredients equal better results. And it's okay if you get messy in between. And that is the beauty of Charm, is because you can go in and take out stuff that's no longer relevant or brought you to that aha moment, and you're really hyper focused there. So if you do have, if listeners listening do have to clean up their AI soup, definitely recommend a tool like CharmIQ that allows you to do that. One of the things I love about Charm is that sidebar conversation. Sometimes I just have a thought or an idea and I want to sidebar that before I really bring it in. And once I kind of nail it, I then, ask my Charm to bring it into the document, and they do that. Another thing I really love that you taught me is like always ask your AI, what am I missing? What question, what more information do you need from me? Because sometimes there's stuff that I'm forgetting about or needing, and I love prompting them to prompt me.
Absolutely. If there's one thing that just every single time that it happens to me, that I feel like I'm stuck, I feel like there's a situation in which I'm not getting I actually had this morning. I had a situation in which I'm not getting the information that I wanted. And so I asked my Charm, I said, like, here's what I was thinking that I would want for a result. Like, why am I not getting that? And he's like, oh, very interesting. Like, I hadn't thought about this. Like, maybe we should talk about these points first. And I was just like, oh, that's interesting. I didn't realize that our conversation was kind of carrying us a particular direction, and it helped me. So, again, much like you can't go into your Excel and say, well, what am I missing here? Like, what piece, like looking at this spreadsheet as a whole, like, am I missing anything here? And like those are the value that we're going to be getting out of all of these artificially intelligent tools as we get closer to them, is how do we not just be the question askers anymore?
Yes.
We want to have it ask us and pull that information out of us. And I'll say, I think we're going to start to see that more and more over the next year as we go into 2026. I think we're going to see that these are going to be much more inquisitive about the types of things that we're doing and asking us more questions about what we're doing. And again, if you think, as the example we always give, if you think about the new hire, or you think about the intern that you brought in, think about all the questions that they have that they ask. And it would be great if it started to ask more of those, and you put that in the context and you include it in there. I think that would get much better results than you see today.
Yeah, I think that one underlying thing I always hear from you and what we talk about is, and like we'll say it again, don't treat it like a tool, like a hammer, right? Don't just pound the nail into the wall. Treat it like a human. Treat it like a relationship you have with a boss, with a mentor, with a friend, right? Make it a two-way conversation. That way your results are going to be much clearer, cleaner, and you can really riff on that on that conversation to get maybe, other thoughts that you weren't normally thinking or other perspectives that weren't in front of you. So if you were rewriting AI from scratch, what would be lesson one? Because we can all kind of start over. And for those listening, maybe just starting, what would that lesson one be?
Forget everything you know about the tools you use today. Again, forget about the Google type in the 4 keywords. Think about it like a conversation. And in that conversation, exploit the things that it does really, really well. So we know it hallucinates. Again, from my perspective, that is the most positive thing that these LLMs can do today, because I use it for brainstorming. I use it for helping me think in different ways that I hadn't thought before. And if it was only telling me direct factual statements, then I wouldn't get the richness that I got out of it. So lean into the things that it does really well today, which is the brainstorming and the ideas. And again, within that, think about the things that are not like the human. So again, you talk to another human, you don't get the ability to take the foot back out of your mouth. You can't say the thing that you shouldn't have said. But with these new tools that we have available to us, these new cognitive partners that we have available to us, you can have that conversation multiple times with multiple personas, with multiple contexts, and you wouldn't believe the richness that you will get out of it. And it's less about prompting tricks. Again, 2 years ago, you absolutely had to remember very specific things to say, think step by step, and all these sorts of things. For the most part, those have completely gone away. Simply remembering the fact that you can ask your cognitive partner what you might be missing or why the conversation isn't going the way you want to. Those typically will give you better prompts than you would have ever thought about. So what's interesting is when I first started working with Charm, the first thing I created was a methodology Charm. And it would help me think through problems. And I still would encourage people to do that kind of thing, which is think about how to think about things. Because again, what's somewhat interesting about ChatGPT is it feels like you were talking to one person and it's one thing.
Yes.
And I always find that challenging, especially coming from Charm, is that I am constantly talking to different voices that have different opinions and different ideas. And I'm constantly soliciting different ideas and different opinions and bringing them together and removing them and having them talk to each other about ideas and having them build upon those ideas. And I really, again, these are the things that it does really well today. So find a manifestation of these cognitive partners that allow you to do that kind of thing. And again, think relationships, think the way that you talk to humans. I would never think of Chelene as yet another tool in a tool belt that I have. I think of her as a person who brings certain skills and brightness to this conversation. And you should find your cognitive partners in the different manifestations that have very similar things.
Yes.
So that's a litany of things to have there. And there's not just one thing, but I think all of those techniques will get you to that next level.
Yes, I agree. The AI relationship management tool in the toolbox, like, don't just think of it as like a hammer or a blank screen that you're typing 4 keywords into. This is an AI relationship management opportunity. One tip I love to share, and I've shared it before and I'll keep sharing it because it's really transformed the way that I interact with AI and the machines that are on my team. I no longer type. I no longer type to it. I have a shortcut on my computer. I hit my shortcut key and I speak like I would speak to Rob, like I would speak to Charlie, like I would speak to my mom, my dad, my boss, my mentor. Speaking and having that flow of words and conversation automatically changes my engagement with the machine, with the platform, whether it's ChatGPT or Charm. Speaking, I think I'm a much better speaker than I am a writer. That's why I'm not an author. But I think that's one tip for me that really humanizes the relationship that I have with all of the assistants and all of the machines I work with. So that's just a quick little tip. So Rob, this has been illuminating, again, giving us some really good, very specific things to think about and change if we're currently using these machines the way we should. This is AI relationship management So before we go, I'm going to start something new, a little tradition at the end of each episode to make it a little more engaging. Let us know what you think. Each week, someone on the show will share their favorite tip, their favorite new machine, an aha moment, or something that they genuinely love about how AI has improved their lives or at least made it better or more fun. So I'll kick it off. This week's moment I wanted to share with our audience. I used AI to set up a custom Spanish tutor inside CharmIQ to support my son Charlie with his summer school class. Charlie is not a super fan of Spanish and struggled in Spanish 1 the beginning of his high school career last year. So we decided to do Spanish 2 online. He is dreading July 1st when he starts his class. But have no fear, Charlie and I sat down this morning and went into Charm and we created a summer school teacher/tutor in Charm that's very specific to Charlie. So we set it up, we gave it the course information, all the assignments, due dates, tests. But what we did and what I love using Charm and these machines for is we tailored it to Charlie's interests. Charlie will somehow, some way connect with this Spanish 2 class because the tutor knows his interests and knows what pushes his buttons. She also recommended, to make it more relevant and fun, that we set up a contest with rewards for hitting certain milestones, which was not something I was thinking of. So Charlie can now hit his milestones and get paid his favorite reward, which is cash. So this is what I love about using AI. It helps me be better, a more prepared parent, especially for moments that matter, and especially because my Spanish 2 is quite rusty. And it's also removed something from my plate. I don't need to micromanage him or nag him about these important dates and milestones. My job is simply to check in and pay him the rewards. So for everyone listening, if your AI results have felt off or generic or frustrating, this is why. The secret isn't better prompt. It's managing the conversation, the context like a pro. So if you have any questions, have any feedback, or want to participate, we would love to hear from you. So please like and share our episodes. We've also made a quick one-pager called Clean Inputs and Smart Outputs. It's just a simple cheat sheet, things for you to remember about this podcast and the subject matter that we're covering. So grab it in the show notes and we'll see you next week. Thanks for joining us. See you next week. Bye.
Adios.